One of the big questions, or I get asked many questions all the time with horses, but one of the things I wanted to preface tonight's discussion with is acknowledging and discussing how often people tend to focus on the horse and what the horse is or isn't doing without ever really considering what they are bringing to the interaction. And in the beginning, when people are learning about horses, learning to interact with horses, having maybe traditional lessons, everything is taught frequently pretty mechanical. So in the sense of this is what you do, this is what you don't do, this is how you sit in the saddle, this is how you use your leg, this is how you use your reins. But there's not really, I believe, enough education to the public as far as understanding the horse itself and how they communicate, what their behavior means, how to recognize their communication and acknowledge it, and learn to work with it in an adaptable manner. So even though we have goals and we may have things that we want to accomplish with our horse, learning how to work with the horse versus just sort of randomly showing up and imposing whatever idea of the moment that we have can lead to very, very different outcomes. And was there quality? Meaning, if we think of every single time that we interact with the horse as a teaching opportunity towards that horse, you are either teaching him to trust you or you're teaching him to become defensive, to become distrustful, to become avoidant in his behavior based on what you offer in the interaction. And if each time that you're interacting with him, your focus or your priority is how do I physically contain him to get him to comply with whatever it is that I want without acknowledging whatever the horse is communicating, you can see very quickly how that can create a horse that wants basically nothing to do with humans. Now, again, as long as we can sort of gently, I'm going to say, bully the horse into compliance, meaning people are often suggested to use stronger equipment, stronger aids, use a flag, use a whip. You ever seen a horse that won't load in a trailer or maybe used to load, but now he's getting slower, doesn't really want to load, takes more time, so people increase the pressure. And, things escalate and eventually the horse does get in the trailer. Now we say, okay, so what did that teach the horse? Yes, you increased the pressure and yes, the horse got in the trailer, but did you ever change how he felt about loading into the trailer? And if you never addressed why that horse had fear or concern about loading and all you're doing during his concern is adding more pressure, then what are you teaching the horse for the next time that you go to load in the trailer? And, each of the interactions that we have with the horse, we have to remember that they influence the next, I'm going to say, segment of the interaction. So in the case of the horse who might be difficult to catch, you have to remember that if you have a horse that is very defensive or anticipative about being caught or wants to go and hide behind the rest of the herd or behind the one tree in the pasture, and we either use bribery, meaning here's food so that I can catch you, horse, or we use tons of pressure, which is common, where we're going to chase the horse around until he decides to quit running, and then he seems like he's willing to be caught. What are you starting with as far as the foundation of the interaction? And if that interaction is based on a fearful experience or bribery, how much mental availability do you have from the horse to participate? How much availability do you have from that horse to be willing to try and address whatever you're asking of him? And you're probably going to have very limited. And so if you're starting with a horse who's already fearful and defensive, and then you keep asking more things of him that are triggering or increasing his concern, then you need to recognize that you're going to get less try and less trust and less willingness from him. And instead, you're going to see increasingly resistant, unwanted behaviors. And so a lot of the things that people tend to reach out for help with, and they'll make comments about, my horse seems really great, except this one thing or except this one issue. It's not really one issue. It's usually an accumulation of many things that maybe seem quite minor, like not that big of a deal, but that have accumulated until the horse reaches a point where he can no longer offer to participate in a reasonable way. And so that is the moment that the human then suddenly goes, oh, I think we might have a problem, versus recognizing perhaps it was a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, where the subtle, reasonable, resistant behavior started showing up. And if we didn't slow down and stop and address the horse when the behaviors were reasonable, then every single interaction since then has been reinforcing that horse's concern, that horse's fear, that horse's whatever is triggering him to feel defensive to where he's no longer willing to participate.